Hello everyone! Before we begin, I want to direct your attention to the link in the description box below. If you're interested in purchasing a follow-along chart and guide for this video, you can head to the Teachers Pay Teachers account below. Thank you and enjoy the video. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Thank you for joining me. Today we'll be talking about the figures of the Enlightenment era. So much of civics is the structure of the United States government. But the U.S. government did not come out of nowhere. The Founding Fathers borrowed their ideas for the government from the Enlightenment thinkers from Europe. Today we'll be focusing on 3 Enlightenment thinkers and 4 documents that inspired the United States. Let us begin today with the Enlightenment thinkers. John Locke was an English philosopher from the 1600s. Locke had several major political ideas during this time, but the one that you're going to be focusing on for the Civics EOC is his idea of natural laws or natural rights. Natural rights are the rights that every human is naturally born with. Natural rights, according to Locke, were life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property. That sounds sort of familiar, but more on that later. Life, liberty, and property is the belief that everyone has the right to live without government influence, the right to live freely, and the right to own and hold property, both physical property, like land, and intellectual property, like access to education. So let's talk about how John Locke's natural rights influenced the U.S. government. Thomas Jefferson, the writer of the Declaration of Independence and future President of the United States, incorporated some of the natural rights into the Declaration of Independence, but he changed them up a little bit. The Declaration of Independence instead says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why would John Locke have life, liberty, and property where Jefferson had life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? In the British colonies and the United States, property was not guaranteed to everyone due to slavery. Slavery remained legal and prominent in the United States up until the 1860s. Jefferson would not promise property when slaves were not given property, and Jefferson himself owned slaves. We're going to dive more into that when we go to American history topics, but for now, you just need to identify that Jefferson took a lot of ideas for the Declaration directly from John Locke. Next, let's move over to Baron Montesquieu. Baron Montesquieu was a French philosopher. Like Locke, Montesquieu had a whole collection of ideas and beliefs during his lifetime. But let's focus on the major one that influenced the United States, the separation of powers. So what is separation of powers? So much of European history, power was controlled by one monarch or king, or a group of wealthy noblemen. Whatever the king said was law. Many New Age thinkers, like Montesquieu, said, hey, what if one dude didn't have all the power? And the others responded, okay, that sounds good, but how? How do you prevent someone from becoming ultra powerful? That's where the idea of separation of powers comes in. Separation of powers is the belief that power is divided among several people or groups. The head guy in charge still has a lot of power, but needs support from the other leaders or other groups to help maintain that power to pass laws. The idea of separation of powers in the United States is evident when you take a look at how our government is structured. The federal government has 3 branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. The executive branch has powers to enforce laws, but they cannot create laws. The legislative creates laws but cannot interpret laws. The judicial can interpret laws but cannot enforce them. We will dive deeper into this in our video on the 3 branches of the U.S. government, but note that the United States took Montesquieu's ideas for separation of powers when drafting how power was structured in our U.S. government. Thomas Hobbes was another English philosopher. His main idea was the social contract. A contract is an agreement between 2 parties. When your favorite athlete signs a contract, they agree to play for a team, and in return, they get money. Hobbes' social contract is similar, but instead of a sports team and athlete, we have a contract between the government and its citizens. The social contract is an implied agreement amongst the people of an organized society that defines the rights, duties, limitations of the governed, and the government. The social contract states that citizens promise to follow the laws set forth by the government, and in return, the government will protect its citizens. The influence of the social contract had in the United States is not as obvious as the ideas of Montesquieu or Locke. The U.S. Constitution promises rights to American citizens. In our video on the U.S. Constitution, we will see how the United States guarantees freedom of speech, right to trial by jury, and so much more. The government gives rights to the American people, and in return, the American people follow the laws that the government sets up. Locke, Hobbes, and Montesquieu contributed numerous ideas to the Founding Fathers, but those three men were not the only ways that the United States got ideas. They were also taken from influential documents. Let's take a look at those documents now. First up, we have the Magna Carta. When talking about the Magna Carta, we first need to introduce you to this guy. This is King John. John was the King of England from 1199 to 1216. During King John's rule, the Archbishop of Canterbury, King John, and several others needed a way to keep the monarchy of England unified. In order to keep the monarchy afloat, King John agreed to give up some of his powers in favor of the people. King John also promised religious protection, fair and quick justice, and limits on the feudal system. This established the term limited monarchy. The Magna Carta showed governments that in order to rule peacefully, the leader had to give up some power and let the people have more say in their government. The Magna Carta did not create the perfect system of government, but it did inspire the U.S. government 500 years after it was written. Power comes from the people, not the king. By the name alone, it's very obvious what in the U.S. government the English Bill of Rights inspired. The English Bill of Rights was drafted in 1689 and officially stated which rights and liberties of the individual were protected under English law. Under the English Bill of Rights, all English citizens were guaranteed specific rights that their government could not take away from them. The United States adopted this by creating their own Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution. Again, more on the Bill of Rights in a different video because that whole document definitely needs its own video, but we will need to identify the importance of the English Bill of Rights into shaping the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution has a Bill of Rights because the English Bill of Rights existed. Our third document is the Mayflower Compact. The Mayflower Compact came about after the Puritans left England in search of religious freedom and arrived in present-day Massachusetts. I don't know if you ever looked at a map of the world, but England is pretty far away from Massachusetts. The Puritans arrived in North America and looked around and said, "Who's in charge around here?" The king was a whole ocean away, and the Puritans realized they would have to govern themselves and create their own laws in order to survive. The Mayflower Compact introduced the idea of self-government. Self-government was adapted by the United States to highlight the belief that people can make decisions for themselves. Common Sense is the most modern document we'll be talking about today. Common Sense was a piece written by Thomas Paine in 1776. The same year the Revolutionary War was happening and the Declaration of Independence was written. Paine's ideas were simple. It was common sense for the colonists to want to gain independence from Great Britain. Common sense is a phrase that means something that is obvious. Common sense inspired many colonists to join the cause of independence. Before you go, let's recap with some review questions. These questions come directly from Civics 360. If you would like to see more of these questions and resources, please go to Civics 360 and check them out for yourself. Question number 1. Which Enlightenment idea is represented by the following image? The Civics EOC loves giving visuals that you need to analyze and break down. So what's going on here in this image? We see a chart that is labeled the 3 branches of government. We see the Constitution up top with 3 arrows pointing down to our 3 branches of government. Since we have the 3 branches of government defined, what is the correct answer for the Enlightenment idea represented here? Pause the video and talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll go over the answer together. The correct answer is number 1, separation of powers. Each branch has its own role, as you can see the label below. Legislative makes laws, executive carries out laws, and judicial evaluates laws. No one branch can do all 3 of those things. Those powers are separated amongst the 3 branches. So this is Baron Montesquieu's idea of separation of powers. Question number 2. How are the Enlightenment ideas that influenced the Founding Fathers reflected in modern institutions? When answering this question, look at the word modern. Modern tells us that we need to connect the Enlightenment ideas of the 1600s and 1700s and bring them into the 21st century. Which 21st century idea best represents one of the Enlightenment ideas that we talked about in this video? Pause the video and talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll go over the answer together. The correct answer is number 3. The United Nations promotes universal human rights. Universal human rights are the rights that everyone is naturally born with, similar to the ideas that John Locke represented in the 1600s. The United Nations today still has the Declaration of Human Rights that was drafted after its creation in 1945. So this is a modern idea that takes the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers. Question number 3. These statements below are from the 1776 Virginia Declaration of Rights. Which statement above reflects the Enlightenment ideas of government as expressed by Montesquieu? When answering this question, you need to remind yourself, what was the idea of Montesquieu? Once you remember that, take a look at the 4 options and talk amongst yourselves. Then we will go over the answer. The correct answer is statement number 2. If you take a look at statement number 2, you will see that there are very clearly labeled out legislative, executive, and judiciary departments shall be separate and distinct. Montesquieu is separation of powers, so he wanted to have the ideas of having 3 separate entities or multiple entities divide power amongst themselves. Question number 4. The passage below was written by Thomas Paine in his 1776 pamphlet, Common Sense. Based on this passage, how is the author's view reflected in the U.S. political system? We know that Paine was pro-revolution, so we need to pick the idea that shows that Paine is pro-democracy and anti-British monarchy, because once you read this question, you identify that it's asking you, what is the point of view and what is the belief of Thomas Paine? So which one of these answer options best shows Paine's point of view? The correct answer is number 4. Representatives are elected. We know that Thomas Paine had issue with the British government. One of the major issues that Paine and other colonists like him took with the British government is that they were underrepresented in government. Colonists wanted to elect their own representation so their voice could be heard in government. Paine believes that representatives are elected. Question number 5. The diagram below shows that the colonists formed some of their political views from historical documents. Which phrase completes the diagram? This question is quite simple. Don't let the image confuse you. They're just asking you which one of these phrases is the idea that comes from the Mayflower Compact. So which idea comes from the Mayflower Compact? The correct answer is number 3, self-government. Magna Carta, we established, is limited monarchy. English Bill of Rights established rights for the citizens. And the Mayflower Compact was self-government. The Puritans had to create their own laws after leaving England. And our final question for today, which documents influence the colonists' views of government? Take a look at all the answer options and remind yourself, which documents did we go over today and which documents influenced the Founding Fathers? The correct answer is number 3. Although documents like the Articles of Confederation, Declaration of Rights of Man, the Virginia Declaration, the Iroquois Constitution were important documents, they weren't the ones that influenced the colonists in the creation of the United States. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. This is our first video in a series on civics. Let me know which topics you'd like to see the most next, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, everyone.